Welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise, a podcast about living with ME and chronic illness, creativity, and making meaning. I'm joined today by Jeffery Smith. Jeffery is a Facebook friend of mine. He listens to the podcast, which is fantastic. And we sort of connected a few weeks ago, maybe months ago, when I talked about maybe doing a series on living with ME and cancer, and the impact of that, and what it looks like, and things like that, and that's what Jeffrey's been going through over. Well, I don't know. You tell me how long it's been as part of your life, really. So, I don't want to sort of give you massive introductions, really. I just want to leave space for you to talk and to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story, if that's all right. So, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time and the energy to come on our podcast and just share your story, and thank you for that. And yeah, how would you describe yourself, Jeffrey?
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk, Daniel. It's a pleasure to meet you in person and to be in your podcast, because I see and feel personally the reach of what you do and the incredible people you bring to us and the information. And I know I shared with you before, the grief series particularly was so profound to me and was so healing. I know that maybe sounds strange to say, but it was, because I was finding people to commiserate with in my deepest sorrow and grief, without being a therapist, but and just feeling so understood so I mean, I think it's incredible you brought that into our homes and into our ears and into our lives. So thank you for that. But I will jump ahead and say who I am. I live in Toronto, Canada. I'm 58. I grew up in a small town, and that was in the 70s, a small town, and I was a queer kid, and so that had a lot of challenges. My whole goal was sort of to get out, get to a city, and survive, but you didn't have a lot of representation, so you didn't really know. Everything was pretty negative, so you felt sort of like society felt about you. There was a lot of self-hate and all that. So things definitely improved when I moved to Toronto when I was a teenager and went to college. But right before I moved, the summer I moved, I got mono. And it's kind of one of these ironies of life. I was finally getting out of the small town. I was, I arrived in Toronto, pretty sick. I think pretty much I had mono for 2 years on and off. So the night sweats and I don't want to be gross about it, but all the stuff that comes with mono, I had pretty severe when I was going to college. And I know from being diagnosed with ME at Stanford University, when we went through my history, that they said that was what they thought was the impetus of my illness, although it didn't really show up, the ME, until I was 30 and got a flu. And I'm one of those people that will basically tell you I got a flu on September 20th, 1996, and I have never not had the flu walking beside me every day since, all of those, at least you can list 13 things every day that are sort of physically sort of impeding any functionality and productivity. So that's sort of how my story started out. And again, it's this irony again, I'll add to that again, but, I came to Toronto and I came out and I found love and my life started and my career started and all this. And then I got ME. I would say, I know our scale I don't think our scale is fair, because, when we say moderate, if you said you had a moderate cold, you would expect some person to do a full 100% day. Moderate ME is, I would maybe guess, I don't know, Daniel, do you feel you the moderate ME, right?
Yeah, like bottom end moderate, sometimes dipping into top end severe. But interestingly, I've been like looking at different scales. There was a scale I think that Whitney Defoe did, or came from him, recently, and looking at that, it put me like really firmly in severe, and they'd actually kind of like broken up the severe into about 4 or 5 different categories, which was really
Yes.
good. So it was interesting. Yeah.
Well, okay. So yes. So I mean, that's one of the issues we certainly deal with on top of everything else is when you are as severely ill as you are, or I am, and all the others are, and yet we get sort of pegged as I'm sort of pegged at moderate severe as well, but not full severe, not very severe. But I understand Whitney is very severe on the
Mm.
non-Whitney scale of the old one we have. Um, but that is almost like a catatonic state. And so
Mm.
moderate is severely, severely disabled, as we know,
Yeah.
right? Um, but anyways, so when I was 30 and got sick, I ended up changing jobs about 6 times because cognitively and physically, I just couldn't keep up. But at the same time, because this was 1996, and also my doctor said, you could have chronic fatigue syndrome. You have to have these 9 out of 11 or 12 symptoms. And the
Mm.
one I didn't have was a sore throat. I just never had the sore throat, but I had every single thing else. So he said, you can't have it. And
Oh.
the impetus was sort of, um, you know, I, just sort of the feminist side of me speaking, we understand how so many things in society get labeled, if they're negative, as some sort of female attribute, you
Mm.
know. And so I feel also as queer, you kind of sometimes get put in that thing that, I was put, oh, well, you're high strung, you just can't handle stress. So I was, the only prescription I was given was to go to um, relaxation classes. And I'll tell you a funny side story about that. The woman who ran it, this magnificent woman who ran these classes and did them for free, and they were covered by insurance. And um, it just so happened this woman was had no sight. She was blind,
Oh.
and she was quite elderly when I went. She had started this years and years and years and years ago, and it was done in a large room, and we were all on these beds, and she would talk us into a meditation and all of
Mm.
this sort of thing. But just because I have this sense of humor that I have, and I try to laugh at as much as I can in life. But you're trying to relax so much, but this poor 80-year-old woman is walking around and she's sort of hitting things, and she's coming up to you and she's kind of grabbing your neck and doing all these things, and it's like, anyways, it wasn't relaxing. I was so
Oh
worried about
no.
her. I was so worried about this sweet lady. But anyways, that's totally neither here nor there. But that was the only treatment I was given was, relaxation classes, find a therapist, you know, um, and so I couldn't get time off work. Again, I was trying to change jobs to keep up with it. I eventually I took all the advice I was getting and I went to see a therapist, which I find therapy valuable. I've always found therapy valuable for anybody. And it was valuable for me. And I started talking about childhood things and this and that. But nothing did anything for my energy. Nothing did anything for my ME. Nothing improved anything there whatsoever. All this, um, self-awareness and healing was great, but it did nothing to allow me to
Mm.
be more be more cognitive, to be more productivity, to be able to remember things at work. I was somebody who I was doing okay at work, and I was, you'd win a few things here and there. And I worked at a bank, and um, but then I just couldn't even remember, but as like you just can't even find words.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing at work is you get starting to get written up. Something's really declined in the last whatever, and
Mm.
anyways, you can't take this to your doctor because they already think you're kind of just a bit hypersensitive and all of this. So, I ended up, again, continuing to change jobs, continuing to fail at these jobs. And then I got a little reprieve. We were talking about this. I got a little reprieve when I went on sleeping medication because sleeping had always been a problem for me, particularly with ME. And I also went on a low dose anti-anxiety, which was helping me deal with the crushing effects of ME and the loss of so many of my skills in my life. And anyways, that was helping me manage the ME better. And between that and I don't know what else, I did get a little remission. I was probably living at around the 20% mark, and I probably went up as high as the 40% mark for about 6 or 7 years, which was double, which meant things that I hadn't been able to do forever and ever. I was able to travel in a limited way. I traveled like a senior, would go on a cruise, but I could do it. And as you were saying, I tried to work out. I was trying to do everything to get health. But the stamina wasn't there to achieve much of anything, and it was hurting me. But then I changed careers entirely and started doing something I loved, designing magazines. It was using. I love doing things creative. I always loved art, and so I was loving this. And so I started a little business with a friend, which was helping because now I could sort of work hours that I was able to function in. And I did that until 2019 when I just got too sick with ME because I just couldn't meet any deadlines. So I did that, for about 11 years. And in between that time, I started to get more poorly again. There was the progression, which is something that just the information isn't just out there, I find, for us with ME to whether to warn us or to educate us about the progression of this illness and how over time, and all the people I know that I've known for 28 years with my experience of ME have experienced some level of this that over time, even though they have these ups and downs and remission years and things, that there's this thing going down. It's only in 2015 that I bothered to get an official diagnosis of the ME, and because my doctor at this time was a much better doctor because that doctor retired. Said you probably have myalgic encephalomyelitis, and I'm like, oh my God, somebody said that word to me, right? And I said, I'd like an official diagnosis because, I mean, now that's 19 years of being ill, right? And he said, I could sort of say it, but, there'd been an article, from magazine, I think in 2014 or 15 on ME, and Stanford University had a clinic there. So anyways, I shared that with him, and he did the referral, and I went there, and I spent, a couple $1,000s of blood tests, and we discovered all kinds of very interesting things that not only gave me an official diagnosis, and I don't know how many other ME patients have had this, but it sort of showed things like I had Epstein-Barr virus reactivating every 24 hours in my system. And I had micro pneumonia, mycoplasma pneumonia, just things I never knew I had and running around in my blood system for 20 years. And so it was really an incredible moment to have laboratory tests that matched my level of illness as opposed to all the normal tests that were the only ones I could get here, And so that was great. But this sort of coincided. Am I talking too much?
No, not at all. Carry on. I'm just listening. It's good.
This kind of coincided with I had a bad colonoscopy and found out I had a tumor in my colorectal area, and that sort of pushed me down a lot because I had to have a bowel resection, had to have like 90% of my rectum removed, and then I had to have an ostomy bag for 6 months. And to qualify to get rid of that ostomy bag, and it was hell. Like on top of ME, Daniel, I'd be in the bathroom trying to put these 11 appliances onto where my colon, I'm sorry, my whatever it is, the colon, I guess, pulled out of my stomach, and I can't stand without tremoring, right, because of the ME. So I'm trying to catch all these things that are falling. This thing leaks. There's always fluid going through. It was just hell, and I just thought I'm going to do everything I can to get rid of this thing. And part of that was I had to strengthen myself, and I had to walk a half an hour a day. And so in that week of stayed after surgery and with ME, I was pushing myself so hard to walk a half an hour every day, and I did it, and I got the reversal, and I'm so grateful I did. But I've never ever been able to return to where I was at that point. Like I was sort of trying to go to the gym 1 or 2 days a week and very gentle stuff, but I could not even get to the gym and get into the change room to change at that point. Like I was just too exhausted, and so everything sort of started going down from there. That's a really long story.
And like really hard as well. And like, I just thought it'd be good to circle back to something you said quite early about almost like the doctors putting your issues down to like stress, and from the sort of feminist perspective, like you mentioned, like do you feel that your sexuality played a part in that, in terms of like them perceiving or putting on, almost like discriminating against you in a way because of your sexuality?
I honestly do, and I'm not somebody who's ever really felt to call that out in my life. I know I'm a white male, and I know what privilege that has given me, and I knew that way before things that we have learned recently in education we've all had. I think just because I knew I was gay, so I knew I was passing as something that made life easier for me than who I really was, and I felt there would be this huge level of hate against me if people knew. Like I was always, it seems silly and it seems contrite and it maybe even seems inappropriate to say this, but I always related to somebody who's Jewish or black or of color. Because I just felt they just can't see that in me. But these are who I am. I'm these people that are other, that aren't, you know, I just felt such empathy. I just felt such understanding. And I do know that my first doctor particularly was sort of labeling me as, hysteria. And from talking to all my friends with ME now, particularly female friends, like to see the things that they have experienced, whether it's these, is it called the lightning process? I can't remember the name now, but
Yeah, we just talked about that recently. Yeah.
okay, yes, saw that too. So all of those things that are pushed so often, at least I have seen on women. I mean, and it's like, just retrain your brain. You're just, in this state where you're thinking you're ill, but think you're healthy. It's just, anyways, on and on. But I don't think that gets pushed to men at all the way it gets pushed to women. And I do think that, somebody who was out and identified as queer, young, in a time before things sort of changed to some degree, that was sort of part of a stereotype. And I mean, I've seen these things change, certainly with my doctor now, but it definitely was the only treatment that was being offered, which was that you're sort of you're hyper vigilant, you're hypersensitive, you're hyper high strung. Was I those things? I'm not going to say whether I was or wasn't, because I don't honestly know compared to what. I don't know. I just knew I was ill and the bottom of my health had fallen out, and I was trying to function in a fully productive way to pay rent and have a life, and I'd lost my capability to do that. So it certainly crashed my my coping mechanisms, absolutely, but it would anybody.
And the exhaustion does in itself. Like the exhaustion kind of makes you kind of feel more stressed, and like you say, you've got like bills to pay or whatever. Or
Yeah,
ultimately, how am I going to live, kind of thing. And that was what I went through. Like, we had a young family, and it's like all of a sudden you're
oh,
thinking we've got a mortgage, and how do I pay the mortgage? Because like my sick
right.
pay is running out in a few months' time. So it's like
How
but
does
for
that not
you,
make you sicker and more stressed?
yeah,
I mean, you know, it's interesting to me, and I know this is a whole other topic, and this isn't our talk today, but I do sometimes get frustrated when, with ME patients, we look for trauma and justification for why we might be such messes physically.
mm,
But what always frustrates me is that, the stockbroker who has a heart attack because of stress, and they acknowledge that stress is part of his ill health,
mm,
and it's not a stigma. It's
no,
not you caused this to happen because of flaw in your personality.
mm,
Life is stressful. You're doing a stressful job and you're trying to survive. And so, anyways, it's just a topic that sometimes frustrates me because, you know what? You could, look under any of our lives and find so much trauma and difficulty, all of us. But all that so often happens for us with ME is we look for that instead of the organic medical issue, you know? Um,
mm,
why can't we just say that, yes, stress and trauma causes heart disease, cancer, ME, possibly MS? Who knows? I don't know.
yeah,
But why is it different with ME that it's the only cause and effect as opposed to just something that causes an
a
actual
factor,
organic breakdown of your health?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, yeah. So then you're sort of dealing with the ME, and then the cancer comes along, and you're sort of dealing with all of that. And then how has that progressed for you in terms of like managing the cancer, and then that it has become more degenerative, hasn't it? As I understand for you, and then you're having to sort of how is the ME impacted on the cancer, or the cancer impacted on the ME, or how do the two things kind of go together for you in your experience?
yeah. Um, one thing I will just want to call out at the beginning, and I know it's really obvious to say, but when you have ME and there's such a breakdown of your system, you can ignore so many things going on because what fresh new hell is this sort of thing, right? Um,
Yeah.
so you just you start to think everything is ME, and so when I had what I thought was irritable bowel syndrome and it ended up being a tumor in my rectum, I ignored it for a year. So I'm just
Wow.
calling that out for anyone with ME to please always look into these things, because all it took was a colonoscopy and they just basically started it and stopped it and said that that's blocked and there's a tumor. I could have found that out much sooner and had a much less traumatic situation happen.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of what's happened recently for me is a year ago I got COVID. I kind of got a swollen gland, but then it got really big and hard, this gland. And I kept going to the doctor, and I was getting, I don't call them scans. I guess they just CT scans, things like that. But they couldn't determine what it was, but there was a mass. So now it was being called a tumor. But they said that tumors in this area, the parotid gland, are usually 80% benign. So there wasn't really much urgency to do anything. I was sent to a neck surgeon. He was very, uh, you know, unworried that it was cancer or anything. So it took months and months and months. So it was about 6 months, and it had grown about 6 times the size. I was now at this point, the pain was so bad. I was on hydromorphone every 5 hours and sleeping sometimes 15 minutes to 2 hours a night because the pain was so bad. And they told me here, because we have socialized medical, and something I always was a champion of, maybe not as much now, but um, that it would be at least 6 months to do to do surgery. And I just thought, I can't last 6 months because the pain is so intense. Um, and so I went on a Facebook page for parotid gland tumors, And everyone there, I took a public picture, they all said, that looks like aggressive cancer. I mean, these are patients,
Wow.
not doctors.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, do a free Zoom with the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. There's a doctor there, an amazing doctor who does these surgeries, which I did do. As soon as his, I guess, medical assistant saw me on the screen and him, they both said, I'd fly you here tonight if we could,
Wow.
which was terrifying, but also very helpful because I knew that something was really wrong. End result was I had this surgery, and this entire parotid gland and some lymph nodes were cancerous. He thought it was a certain type of cancer called MEC, and I can't remember what it stands for now, but he told us, okay, it's 98% curable, whatever. And I remember waking up and my husband Dave saying, you did it, you beat cancer, we got it out, But then we came home, and I guess 3 days later, I got a call from the oncologist, from the surgeon at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, saying that the pathology came back, and he wanted to let me know that it was metastatic melanoma, which is stage 4. And he was very, very sorry. And that just sort of started this whole new world I'm in. And then I got a call from my GP, who received the same report, just saying how sorry he was. And it was a very quick flip from 98%, I got rid of the cancer. My big worry was, because I'm still paralyzed to some degree on this side, was how long. I thought my biggest worry was going to be how long this paralysis is going to last, and how long until the cancer comes back sometime. But it's in my body now, so it's in multiple places. About 2 weeks after I had a scan that was clear in my lungs, I had innumerable tumors in my lungs. And we started immunotherapy. My oncologist did reach out to my ME doctor. I'm lucky enough that I found a doctor that I can pay a yearly fee to see for ME, and reached out just to see how would I survive immunotherapy with ME. I appreciate it. That's one of the few times anyone's taken it seriously, that they would even reach out to check things like that. My ME doctor felt that immunotherapy, being immune boosting, could only be of any benefit to me because my immune system is so, it's debatable, of course. Is it dormant? Is it overworked? Is it underworked? But since I started immunotherapy, I was able to get 3 infusions of what they call a double dose, which is something called, all the short forms are IPO and NIVO. And I seem to be doing okay through the beginning of immunotherapy. And this is strange, Daniel, through the whole process with cancer, the whole year, like from the last year up until the last couple of weeks, there was some lessening of the that overall flu feeling that we have with ME. So that disorientation when you walk, the holding the walls, the constant dizziness, even lying in bed, you feel you're in a boat instead of a bed. Just that extra layer of flu crumminess was sort of gone. I had the severe fatigue, I had the severe weakness, I had no stamina. But I didn't have that extra layer. And I don't understand it. Somebody might one day, why cancer changed that. And immunotherapy possibly as well. But what's happened in the last few weeks is I've developed, from the immunotherapy, hepatitis, pancreatitis, and now diabetes. So right now my body's fighting that on top of stage 4 cancer, on top of ME. So I am really, something's changed in the last couple of weeks. I am fully bedbound, except for going to the hospital, and weak. I'm finding it easier to make choices, not to talk to people or see people. I don't see people. I haven't seen people in years, basically. I mean, one-offs here and there, like a day with my father at Christmas or something. But so that's happened, and then there's a lot of prep going on based on my diagnosis, and we can talk about that too. But things I'm looking into and dealing with my biggest fear is this what's happened now is that along the facial nerve, the nerves all that come out of it on my neck and face have all started growing cancer out of the nerves. So my big fear is going to the brain, because people that get this in the brain, they go blind, they have seizures, they have strokes. And there's, to what end would I have all those things is the point, because my prognosis is up to 4 months and under a year, somewhere in there. So I have actively started the process of, I've signed the application for the MAID, medically assisted in dying. I've had the first assessment, which was approved, having the second assessment on Monday. This isn't something I'm setting a date on. It's not something that I may even end up doing, but I am getting so close to these things that I want to have this insurance in my back pocket in case things radically change, because I don't want to die in hospital. I want to die at home. And, I just don't want to have, I see no point in again, going blind and having strokes and being hooked up to machines when it's the end anyways, right?
Yeah.
So it is a bummer conversation for you.
No. And is that something that's more available in Canada? Is it like something that's, because often over here in the UK, people are having to consider going across to Switzerland or somewhere like that to do that. So
there's it's funny. I've got two of the people that I found to help Dave and I through this are two end-of-life doulas, which is sort of a new term. I didn't know this term. Found these two incredible women here in Toronto. They're actually in, I think it's Edinburgh next week, doing a talk with others that are in this profession. And I did not know that in the UK there is not medically assisted assistance in death. It's definitely something I have seen a number of people with ME use in Canada. It's always broken my heart every time I did. I mean, one person I know, I know his wife more, but it's so heartbreaking because they're so young so often. This gentleman was 46, and it also just, before I've been dealing with what I'm dealing with now, it was always something that was in the back of my mind, that if I got to where Whitney is, for example, would I be able to find quality of life the way I think he sometimes is able to, in this amazing way his spirit is. And I also sadly think there's probably an awful lot of pressure being, Whitney Defoe too, because he's sort of such a beacon for all of us, right? And I know he hangs on for all of us. But it was just something that I think probably a lot of us with ME think about, who live in countries that have this. What would we do if we were in that scenario differently? Would we find a floor that we could live with, or would we be tortured to such a degree? So it was always something that was in my mind with ME, if the progression continued the way it had been going. But this is a whole other game changer. And luckily, I'll say luckily, it's a very accepted situation here generally. I know there's some problems in some care homes that, for example, I know of one that is a Catholic care home that they actually have to take the people out to what they call maid house, which is like a hospice area, to do these things. But generally it's accepted. And so it's just one of those things that becomes part of the reality of, I try to be a proactive person. So I just want to, it's like I said, I say it's insurance. It's just insurance that Dave's watched me suffer for 28 years with ME, and he is very kindly saying, I just don't want you to suffer, even though he knows it will start so much suffering for him. And it's helpful to have somebody willing to, the people you love the most, let you go out of that kindness. that part helps. But again, at 58, it's not a place I want to be in at all. But I, outside of my health, I had a great life. You know, outside of health, I had a great life, and I know some people live a lot longer that don't. So I just try to balance a lot of thoughts every day.
What are some of the things that you're most proud of in your life? Because like we've basically spent quite a while today talking about your health and your illness, and like um, some I love seeing your Facebook posts because like it's clear that you're sort of like in love with sort of like Hollywood
Yeah.
sort of
Yes.
50s and 40s
Yeah.
stars of the stage and screen,
Yes.
and like I love seeing that kind of like side of what you're passionate about, and what are some of the things that you've been passionate about, and what are some of the things that you've been most proud of?
Oh, thank you. Okay. Um, that's one indulgence that maybe if you try to look with things like Emmy, what gifts did you get? And obviously the main gift was people. Um, an extra heightened of level of sensitivity that I think was always there and probably so many of us, but I think is really honed to a really beautiful state from having this happen in a strange way because we understand suffering like we probably never would have. And
Yeah.
um, but the things I love, which are so often reading and old movies and things like this, or something I would still be able to enjoy because I wasn't, the sports guy or whatever. I could still surround myself with things that were me, that reflected me, that mean something to me. And when you mentioned the old stars,
Hmm.
somehow in life I ended up being able to meet Elizabeth Taylor
Wow.
and Doris Day. And Doris Day's always been like this savior to me. Like when I was a little kid and my mother was acting really crazy, I'd watch Doris Day and I pretend she was my mother, and my mother wasn't crazy. And yeah, my mother's wonderful, but she was outrageous. But I ended up meeting Doris Day, and she called me on the phone here, I think maybe once or twice, and and we had this beautiful connection. And I mean, she would have had that with many fans, but it was just so special to me. And for that to happen to me, like 50 years later, after I was a little kid, and she was sort of protecting me to talk to her when she was in her 90s, and I was, in my
Yeah.
40s and 50s. Um,
Wow.
uh, but in terms of proud, the one thing I do feel good about is that in 2015, with a number of other individuals, Scott Simpson, Barbara Fifield, and Elizabeth Sanchez, we started Millions Missing Canada.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and we started, you could call it advocacy, but we really started almost militantly. We would immediately, and this is under the direction so much of Scott Simpson, who I don't know if you know his name, but he's been wonderful with. He's also ill with ME, but we would go to the health minister when she would show up at places and do like lions and dine-ins, and interrupted her press conference, like things I would never really think I would end up doing. We would get on the news. We would cause the Ministry of Health to lock themselves down. We were not trying to do that. I mean, the big joke, we used to laugh if the press came, we would say, we can't even get up. Like we are sitting on chairs. We are lying here. It took all our energy. We waited, 2 weeks of rest to get here. So they're locking them down because they're physically frightened of us. I mean, we're like Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. We're going to give you a scratching of a
Yeah,
lifetime, right?
you just snap.
And so I'm really proud of those things we did. And we ended up through those kind of militant actions, getting a meeting with the health minister's office in Ottawa.
Wow.
And we flew to Ottawa, just a few of us, and they brought in someone from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, the CIHR, which fund research in Canada. And anyways, through that, we got connected with them. Some names changed and some people changed positions, but we ended up with this amazing relationship with Krom Khan, who runs the part of the Canadian Institute of Health Research that ME falls under. And Sabrina Poirier, this incredible advocate, had joined forces with those of us meeting with him at this point. And anyways, end result was we did another sort of thing at a new health minister's talk at a town hall, and she invited us all to Ottawa, and things have been going on behind the scenes, but we got the first grant in Canada for $1.7 million in research for ME
Wow.
in 2019. So that's something I'm really proud of, because by then I couldn't even fly to when the press conference happened, because I was getting too ill at that point. But I'm just really proud of that, because when I had that opportunity and physically do those things, I did them. And then now the baton's been taken up by others and doing things. But yeah, that's something I look back and I'm proud of, because things happened after that. Like this wonderful writer, Jane Bernard, I got a book from her. She has ME. She wrote a mystery series, and one of the characters has ME in it.
Oh, wow.
So I got a little book dedicated. Thank you for what you did. Just, I went to the unrest screening, and people sort of came up and thanked you. And I mean, I didn't do any more than anybody else did, but I just had a capacity that they didn't have at that time. And I'm just so glad that, I could hold that baton for a little while when I could. And and even with all that I'm going through, my whole feeling, my whole legacy, my whole soul is with ME. I'm not switched over to the cancer situation, because ME is what affected me for 28 years,
Wow.
and so.
And like time is a funny thing as well when you're living with ME as well, isn't it? It's sort of like time stretches and morphs a little bit, or it kind of like seems to like a month can last forever, but then at the same time, like a year can go by and it feels like it's gone really quickly, and it's so that must feel, and then all of a sudden you kind of like hit with the sudden reality of the cancer, and like you said, other things that are suddenly like the diabetes, for example, suddenly you're getting your head around that, and it's like, how has that been to process for you? Like to suddenly kind of have to learn all this new stuff that you kind of that's what's happening to your body. Is that kind of like a challenge, having to kind of like process it all?
Yeah, I find I'm always a couple beats behind it all.
Mm.
You know, um, I sort of sometimes feel like I'm driving down the road and I've got, you know, 80% of the car in this lane that my life is going to end soon, and I've got these two tires just sort of going over the line into hope sometimes. And not that there is anybody giving me any hope, but I think sometimes you have to have that hope, and that hope doesn't necessarily mean longevity. That hope could mean quality of life,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And as I learn more about palliative care and talk to, more doctors and things like this, that, pain can be managed to a certain degree quite well, and this and that. So but there is just this catch up. It's like, I almost have to remind myself, and I hear it in my head all the time. I'm like, stage 4, and it's awful. It comes back, but it's, on a day I don't, this is the thing. It's really hard when you have this and you have ME, because I can't tell what's what. Like, am I just
Right.
really, really sick with ME, or is this cancer? I mean, I have a very advanced cancer, obviously, but is it that that I'm feeling? So it's a funny thing, but I'll have to tell you that having had ME for as long as I had, I definitely feel I'm in a better place to deal with this than people who get stopped in the middle of a very productive life and end up with a terminal diagnosis. And that sort of was what happened to me when I was 30. Is probably what's happening to people who have this happen now. This isn't what's happening to me now, because I live such a limited life. You know, I just, I picture, you think with ME, you think your life will be shorter. and you sort of picture an age. You think, oh, I don't know, 69, 72.
Yeah.
You know, certain ages, but they feel like you had your early life, you had your middle life, you know, you don't get your old life, um, but yeah, there's a lot of, it's a very confusing thing. And you get the doulas who are directing you gently into the reality of where you're at, but you don't want to go, you know. So you just sort of keep, you know, yeah, it's a strange, again, and I'll say it's a strange thing, because if I just felt the way I felt and I didn't have ME, I would know I'm dying. I would know, you know, that time's very short. But having had ME and being very sick with it so often, there was this little brain fuck about, you know, that's where I've been really sick before for months and months and months and months and months, and I've gotten a little better. And I think that's in my memory circuit, you know. So so there's a little denial that kind of causes.
And I think for you, it must be because we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the grief series that we did on the podcast, and we talked about
Yeah.
how you saw that had been, and like it must feel for you like you've got like a double or triple grief going on, because you've got the grief of like the life that you've lost, all the things you would have done if it hadn't been for ME in the past, but then you've got the very current grief of like what's going on in your life and where things are heading very imminently, and there must be so much to process there. Like you, like are you sort of like in reflective mode, like on overdrive, or do you find a chance to get peace every day, like in a certain way, or is that not possible for you?
Yeah, excellent thought. The grief with ME of not, you know, not being able to do so many things changed into what can I do? And again, as I talked about, you know, the old movies and my favorite books, and I love rereading favorite books. And so my room, as I look around here, is filled with these books I either haven't read or want to reread. So even in my very limited world of ME, there is this future still, you know, that is in front of me that I want, you know. And so I think so much about life, and someone once said this, but is about letting go of things and then ultimately letting go of life. And that's something, you know, I'm working at, being at, trying to be at peace and saying, these books are read, but I'm being surrounded by things that still I'm curious about, I'm interested in, that I love, and, you know, maybe that's okay. And there has been this other strange thing, just as, because I was in the ME world, and because even just in this fan world of Dorothy and these other people, I have a lot of relationships, and though these people are around the world, but for people you talk to, you know, all the time through social media. And I have received so much care and love, Daniel. Like, it's something that most people probably don't get when they pass away. You know, yeah, would I rather die old and forgotten, maybe, but it's so beautiful, and it's so touched by it, and I'm taking it in. And it's almost like I think about it, it's like It's a Wonderful Life, that George Bailey. Do you know that movie?
I've never watched it, and I always intend to. And now I'm gonna I'm gonna make a
Well,
concerted effort, because like it's sort of like the sort of thing that I think at Christmas or whatever, and you think, oh, I need to watch that, and I've just never kind of sat down and watched it. So, and I don't watch a lot of films generally, but yeah, I need to make time.
well, the one thing I really like about it is, what I'm going to say to you here is, I'm living through what I call a George Bailey moment, and in this movie, see, I don't want to ruin the movie for you now,
No,
but
go on.
but in this movie, which is really well known to a lot of people, so I
Yeah,
don't think I'll
yeah,
speak for
no.
different people, but the one character sort of starts the movie off. His life is so messed up, you know, that he's going to jump off this bridge, and this
Yeah,
angel comes to save him and takes him back and shows him what his life would. I mean, it's sort of a Christmas Carol in a sense, right?
got you.
And but in the end, um, what happens is that everyone gets to tell this man the little things he did that impacted their lives, and how much he meant. And I've been living that experience. Like, it's almost like, I don't want to say being at your own funeral because that sounds so gross. I don't mean it that way,
Yeah.
but like, I had someone I worked with 30 years ago who I know still, but she sent me a note. She goes, when I moved to Toronto from from the prairies and Winnipeg,
Yeah, yeah.
and and
I
she
live
said,
there, by the way.
I
That's why
know
we're
that's, yeah,
mentioning the Winnipeg. That's why we
yeah.
talked about it.
Um, and she said, I didn't know how to, I had to get a whole new wardrobe because I was in Toronto, and I need all this. And she goes, I don't know if you remember this, but you took me out shopping and you helped me, you know, get all these clothes, and then you took me to lunch. And I mean, I don't even remember this because it was just a day, but to
Yeah.
her it was this thing. And it's like, it's a beautiful thing for me to have that reflected back on me, something I did when I was whatever age, that that I didn't know I was kind back then, and I didn't know I did something like that. Whatever, it's just a small little thing, but
Mm.
I don't take any of that stuff for granted. And I just think, amongst so much awful stuff, there are gifts. Just like I've always felt that same way about ME. Like, I mean, I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't know so many of the people both of us know who have enriched our
Mm.
lives and given them so much more meaning as well.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So it's the people that come in and out of our lives that that make the life, give it meaning as well, I
Well,
suppose.
and I could be wrong, but I would even think, I mean, I could tell the type of person you are already, but I would think that what's happened to you has even bonded you with your loved ones even more intimately and deeply than
Mm.
could have happened without it. And it's not something you'd ever choose, but I just think that your soul being bared more than it would be maybe otherwise has just made people care and love you more and know the real you more. And it's hard to deny that that isn't something that's meaningful in life.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's a good place to end the recording. Is there anything else that you'd like? Part of me would say, like, I almost, because I know like I'm almost like I'm sort of processing as we're talking, and I'm thinking, like, for our listeners and viewers, like, they're going to have found this episode really profound, and they're going to want to know how you're doing. So if you don't mind, if we can update people,
Of course.
or to be honest, like, if you want to keep us updated, if you want to come on and keep us updated with your journey and do a 10-minute episode or whatever, we could
Sure.
do that as well. Because I think there's something that's really special about what you've been sharing today, and like, I'm just a bit blown away by the philosophical nature that you bring to what you're going through, and um a level of positivity despite it all, because I can only imagine that it would feel an awful lot of turmoil, but you carry a dignity with it that is so yeah, it kind of blows you away a little bit, and I just thank you so much for sort of sharing with us. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
The only thing I'll add, again, I'll just remind people with ME that when something else feels awry, like
Mm.
every other person, you have every right to get that checked out because it could be something besides the ME. Um,
Mm.
that's it. Just, but this has been a wonderful talk, and I honestly, I'm honored to be on on your podcast because it's so meaningful to me and to so many people.
Mm. And I'm honored that you've given us your time today. So yeah, we will keep people updated on your journey, and I don't know if that's the right word, or your progress, or
Yeah,
um yeah, and maybe, like, if we touch base, going forwards, yeah, it'll be good to keep in touch in that way as well. So
thank,
yeah,
that's
thank you
great.
so much, Jeffrey.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Brilliant. Take care.
Take care.